Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. 3 years ago, I purchased my first house, a modest 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood just outside the city. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine, or at least I thought it was. The house needed some work, but it had good bones, and I was excited to make it my own. The mortgage payments were manageable on my salary as an IT consultant, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was building something for my future. The neighborhood was mostly quiet, with a mix of retirees and young families. Most of my neighbors were friendly, waving when they saw me bringing in groceries or working in my yard. All except for one, the woman next door, who I later came to know as the neighborhood Karen. From the moment I moved in, Karen made it clear she wasn't happy about having me as her neighbor. At first, it was just subtle things, refusing to return my waves, visibly grimacing when I was outside, or making loud comments on her phone about the neighborhood going downhill whenever I was within earshot. I tried to brush it off. After all, you can't please everyone, and I was too busy fixing up my house to worry about one unfriendly neighbor. In those first few months, I replaced the old kitchen countertops, painted every room, and started working on the overgrown backyard. I was proud of the improvements I was making, even if they were happening slower than I'd initially hoped. Then, about 6 months after I moved in, the real trouble started. I came home from work one day to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the city, informing me that a complaint had been filed about unsightly property conditions and possible code violations. I was stunned. While my yard wasn't perfectly manicured yet, it certainly wasn't a mess either. I was halfway through a landscaping project with new plants waiting to go in that weekend. As I stood there reading the notice, I heard Karen's door open. "Finally," she said loudly, not even pretending she wasn't talking to me. "It's about time someone did something about this eyesore." I turned to face her. "Excuse me?" "Your house," she said, gesturing dismissively at my property. "It's bringing down all our property values. Some of us have worked hard to maintain this neighborhood, and we don't appreciate newcomers ruining it." "I'm in the middle of improvements," I explained, trying to stay calm. Rome wasn't built in a day. "Well, this isn't Rome, and you're not an emperor," she snapped. "This is a respectable neighborhood with standards." I didn't want to escalate things, so I just nodded and went inside. The next day, I called the city office to discuss the complaint. They sent out an inspector who found no actual code violations and told me not to worry about it. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few months, the complaints multiplied. Karen reported me for noise violations when I was using power tools during completely reasonable hours. She called animal control when my sister's dog stayed with me for a week, claiming it was dangerous and unleashed. It wasn't. She even reported my car as abandoned when I left it parked in my driveway while taking a business trip. Each time, officials would come out, find nothing wrong, and leave. But each incident meant time away from work to deal with inspectors, paperwork to fill out, and the growing stress of living next to someone who was clearly on a mission to make my life miserable. Then came the certified letter that nearly gave me a heart attack. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, requiring my signature. Inside was a formal notice, appearing to be from a law firm, stating that I was occupying the property illegally and needed to vacate within 30 days or face eviction proceedings. According to the letter, there had been a dispute in the chain of title, and I had no legal right to the property. My hands were shaking as I read it. I had done everything by the book when buying the house. I had a mortgage, proper documentation, and had even paid for title insurance. How could this be happening? I immediately called my real estate attorney, the same one who had helped me with the closing. He was as confused as I was and asked me to scan and email him the letter right away. Later that afternoon, he called me back. "So, I've looked into this," he said, "and I have good news and bad news. The good news is that this is complete nonsense. There's no issue with your title whatsoever. The bad news is that someone is clearly trying to scam or intimidate you." "It's my neighbor," I said without hesitation. "She's been trying to drive me out since I moved in." "Well, the firm named in this letter doesn't exist," my attorney continued. "At least not as a legitimate law practice in this state. This is fraudulent and potentially criminal. We should report this to the police." I filed a police report that same day, but without proof that Karen was behind the letter, there wasn't much they could do except take down the information. The officer advised me to install security cameras, which I promptly ordered online. The cameras were up by the weekend, and it didn't take long for them to prove useful. The very next Monday, I checked the footage from while I was at work and saw Karen walking up to my front door, examining the lock, and then walking around the house, peering in windows. The footage made my skin crawl. This wasn't just a grumpy neighbor anymore. This was someone invading my privacy and potentially planning something worse. I took the footage to the police station, where the officer who had taken my report agreed this was concerning behavior. He said they would send someone to talk to Karen, but warned me that without evidence of an actual crime beyond trespassing, there might not be much more they could do. True to form, Karen denied everything when confronted by the police. She claimed she was just checking on the property because she was concerned about squatters. The police warned her to stay off my property, but she seemed more annoyed than deterred. The next escalation came about a week later when I arrived home to find a locksmith at my front door. "Can I help you?" I asked, confused why someone would be messing with my lock. The man looked equally confused. "I was called to change the locks. The owner said the tenant was being evicted." "I am the owner," I said firmly. "Who called you?" He checked his work order. "A Mrs. Walters? She said she's the property owner and needed the locks changed immediately." Mrs. Walters, Karen's last name. Now she was actively trying to lock me out of my own home. "Call the police," I told the locksmith. "Right now. This woman is not the owner and she's committing fraud." By the time the police arrived, Karen had come outside, loudly insisting to anyone who would listen that she was acting within her rights because I was an illegal occupant of the property. The police officer, thankfully the same one who had taken my previous reports, was losing patience with the situation. "Mrs. Walters, do you have any documentation whatsoever showing that you own this property?" he asked. "I have the original deed right here," she said smugly, holding up a folded document. The officer took it, examined it, and then looked at her with a mix of disbelief and annoyance. "Ma'am, this is a printout of a blank deed form from the internet. It's not even filled out. This proves nothing." Karen's face reddened. "Well, I have other papers at home that prove it. He's squatting on this property. It belongs to my family." The officer had heard enough. "Mrs. Walters, I'm giving you an official warning. If you continue to harass this homeowner or attempt to interfere with his property, you will be arrested. Is that clear?" She stormed off without answering, slamming her door so hard I could feel the vibration from across the yard. After this incident, my attorney advised me to file for a restraining order, which was granted based on the pattern of harassment and the attempted illegal lockout. Karen was now legally required to stay at least 100 feet away from me and couldn't contact me directly. For a few weeks, things were blessedly quiet. I continued working on my house, installed additional security measures, and tried to put the whole uncomfortable situation behind me. But as it turned out, Karen wasn't done yet. She was just changing tactics. About a month later, I received another official-looking letter, this time from the county tax assessor's office, saying that my property taxes were severely delinquent and the house was at risk of being seized for a tax sale. This sent me into another panic until I called the tax office directly and confirmed that my taxes were completely current. I paid them through my mortgage escrow account and everything was in good standing. The letter, like the eviction notice, was fake. At this point, I was thoroughly fed up. I took the fake tax letter to the police as another piece of evidence of ongoing harassment, and they agreed to increase patrols in our neighborhood. I also consulted with my attorney about filing a civil lawsuit against Karen for harassment, emotional distress, and the various costs I'd incurred dealing with her false claims. As we were preparing the lawsuit, something unexpected happened. A real official notice appeared, not on my door, but on Karen's. It was a foreclosure notice. Apparently, while she was busy trying to drive me out of my home, she'd neglected to pay her own mortgage for quite some time. I'll admit, I felt a certain vindication seeing that notice, but I also recognized an opportunity. What would it take to buy her house at the foreclosure auction? I asked my attorney during our next meeting. He looked at me with surprise. "You want to buy your harasser's house? Are you sure about that?" "Absolutely," I said. "I know the house has good value. It's similar to mine, but on a slightly larger lot, and I can think of no better way to end this than by becoming her landlord." My attorney laughed. "Well, it would certainly be poetic justice. Let me look into the details for you." The foreclosure process typically takes several months, which gave me time to get my finances in order. I had been saving aggressively since buying my house and had built up a decent emergency fund. I also had excellent credit and was able to secure pre-approval for a second mortgage if needed. The auction was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. Karen, apparently oblivious to the fact that I knew about her foreclosure, continued her campaign against me, albeit from a distance due to the restraining order. She had started telling other neighbors that I was a criminal who had stolen the house from her family, which was why she was being forced to move. The day of the auction arrived, and I took the morning off work to attend. There were about 20 people there, mostly professional investors looking to flip properties for profit. Karen's house was lot number 7 on the auction list. When it came up, the auctioneer described it as a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, single-family residence and started the bidding at the amount owed to the bank plus fees, which came to about $205,000. This was actually a good deal for the area, where similar homes were selling for around $260,000. I waited as a few investors made bids, driving the price up to $220,000. Then I raised my hand and bid $225,000. Another investor countered with $230,000. I went to $235,000. The investor hesitated, then shook his head. The auctioneer called out my bid 3 times, and just like that, I was the new owner of Karen's house. After completing the necessary paperwork and transferring the funds, I received a certificate of sale. The bank would process the final deed transfer once all the legal requirements were met, which would take a few more weeks. But effectively, Karen's house was now mine. I didn't immediately tell Karen about my purchase. I figured she would find out soon enough when the official notifications went out. In the meantime, I consulted with my attorney about my obligations and rights as the new owner. "You'll need to follow proper eviction procedures," he advised. "Even though she's losing the house to foreclosure, she still has certain rights as the occupant. But given her history of harassment, I think we can make a case for an expedited eviction if needed." I nodded, taking detailed notes. "I don't want to stoop to her level. I want to do this by the book, but I also don't want to give her any opportunity to cause more trouble." 2 days after the auction, the official notification was delivered to Karen. I was working from home that day and heard the commotion from next door. Shouting, things being thrown, doors slamming, then, inevitably, a pounding on my front door. I checked my security camera feed before approaching the door. Karen was standing there, notice in hand, face contorted with rage. I didn't open the door, but used the intercom system I'd installed. "You need to stay 100 feet away from me as per the restraining order," I reminded her. "You bought my house?" she screamed, her voice distorted through the speaker. "How dare you? This is harassment! I'll sue you for this!" "Everything I did was legal," I replied calmly. "You defaulted on your mortgage, and I purchased the property at a public auction. Now please leave before I call the police for violation of the restraining order." She continued ranting for a few more minutes, making wild accusations and threats, all of which I recorded. Finally, she stormed off, but not before yelling, "You'll never get me out! Never!" I sighed, already feeling exhausted by what I knew would be a difficult process. But I was also determined. After months of harassment and stress, I wasn't going to back down now. The next week was tense. Karen had stopped her direct harassment, likely realizing she was now in a very precarious position, but I could see her watching me from her windows. According to the terms of the foreclosure, she had 30 days to vacate the property, and I didn't expect her to go quietly. Sure enough, as the eviction date approached, there was no sign of her packing or preparing to move. I coordinated with my attorney in the local sheriff's department to ensure the eviction would proceed smoothly and legally. 3 days before the deadline, I noticed moving activity next door. Through my security cameras, I could see Karen loading boxes into her car, but something seemed off about it. She was only taking small items, nothing substantial, and she kept looking around furtively as if checking to see if anyone was watching. My attorney advised me to do a drive-by inspection of the exterior of the property, staying in my car to maintain the required distance of the restraining order. What I saw concerned me. The front yard, previously well-maintained, was now littered with trash. The curtains were drawn on all windows, making it impossible to see inside. "I think she's planning to trash the place before leaving," I told my attorney. "Unfortunately, that's not uncommon in eviction situations," he replied. "But deliberate property damage could be considered criminal. Let's notify the sheriff's department of our concerns." The sheriff agreed to send a deputy to accompany us on the eviction day, in case there were any issues. As a precaution, I also hired a professional cleaning and repair crew to be on standby. Finally, eviction day arrived. I met the sheriff's deputy and my attorney at Karen's house, my house now, at 9 a.m. sharp. The deputy knocked on the door and announced the eviction. No response. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. After following the required procedure and giving ample warning, the deputy used the master key provided by the bank to unlock the door. The smell hit us immediately. A mix of garbage, spoiled food, and something worse. Karen was gone, having apparently left sometime during the night, but she'd left a parting gift. The interior of the house was a disaster. Food was smeared on walls, holes punched in drywall, fixtures torn out, and what looked like human waste in some of the carpets. It was worse than I had imagined. The deputy documented everything, shaking his head in disgust. "This is definitely criminal damage to property," he said. "We'll file a report, and you should press charges." My attorney took photos of everything for insurance purposes and potential legal action. The cleanup crew I'd hired took one look and immediately called for reinforcements, saying this was beyond a standard job. Despite the destruction, I felt a strange sense of calm. This was Karen's final act of defiance, but she was gone. The house was mine. and while it would take time and money to repair, it was still a good investment. And more importantly, the neighborhood would now be free of her toxic presence. The cleanup and repairs took almost 3 months and cost nearly $40,000, most of which was fortunately covered by insurance. During this time, I learned from other neighbors that Karen had moved in with her sister in another state. Good riddance. With the house finally restored, actually improved since I took the opportunity to update several features, I had a decision to make: sell it for a profit or keep it as a rental property. After careful consideration and consultations with a financial advisor, I decided to keep it. Within a month, I had found excellent tenants, a young doctor and her husband who had just moved to the area for her residency program. They were thrilled with the house and the neighborhood, and I was thrilled to have responsible, quiet neighbors. As for my original house, I continued the improvements I'd started before all the drama. With Karen gone, I found myself actually enjoying the neighborhood for the first time. Other neighbors who had kept their distance during the conflict now stopped to chat when they saw me outside. One elderly couple who lived across the street finally told me that Karen had been a problem for years, harassing multiple neighbors and even driving the previous owners of my house to move. They were grateful that someone had finally stood up to her. "We just didn't have the energy for that fight," the husband told me. "But you did, and the whole street is better for it." It's been about a year since all this happened. I'm still in my original house, happier than ever with my improvements, and my tenants next door have renewed their lease for another year. The rental income helps offset my mortgage, and the property values in our neighborhood have actually increased substantially. Sometimes I think about Karen and wonder if she learned anything from this experience. Probably not. People like that rarely do. But I learned plenty about standing up for myself, about the importance of documentation and legal advice, and about how sometimes justice comes in unexpected forms. I never set out to own 2 houses, and I certainly never planned to buy my harasser's foreclosed property. But life takes strange turns, and this one worked out pretty well for me in the end. I taught Karen a lesson, came out on top financially, and found peace in my home again. And really, that's all I wanted from the beginning. The next one is a malicious compliances story. A little bit of background before I share the story. Names changed to protect myself from retaliation, because my boss is that petty. The end of December, my old boss stepped down due to going to school, and our new boss took over. All of us were nervous, as our old boss was not exactly the greatest, and the replacement was a stickler for the rules. I noticed an issue with some of how the tasks were assigned the first week of January. The new boss had assigned, let's call them Eric, a task that was impossible for them to do due to how tall they are, as we are required to take photos of equipment's gauges for the client, and said gauges were out of Eric's reach. I called the new boss in regards to the issue and informed them that I would gladly make sure the task would get done, so that the company would not get finned for incomplete tasks. Said boss told me not to do the task and that Eric should be able to handle it. I said, okay, put the phone down. Never thought of this issue again. 3 days ago, in the app we use to communicate as a team, boss was furious. Several tasks had not been completed and they needed reasons as to why. If you remember back to the start of January, I had asked my boss if I could take the tasks of someone else's hands to make sure they were done, and ironically, one of said weekly tasks was the one I offered to do. The others were not done as everyone had been shuffled around due to the termination of a coworker, and not everyone had been trained on the tasks they were asked to complete. Normally, I avoid even responding to posts or comments on said app. I only have it to grab my work schedule, and then I log out of it for the rest of the week. I even have the app's notifications disabled. However, she was blaming the team for not getting the tasks done and looking to scapegoat people, so for the first time, I decided to just let go and call out her hypocritical self out. I responded stating, at the beginning of January, I offered to do said task for you. You told me not to. I told you why I should do said task. You still told me not to, and now because said task is not done, you are in a state of panic. Not my task, not my problem. Boss is now maliciously ignoring my calls and avoids eye contact with me completely. Everyone, including the client, knows I offered to complete said tasks, and she literally has nothing to say to defend herself. Perhaps next time she will listen to what I have to say. The next one is an entitled parent story. I have an extremely complicated relationship with my mom. She was a single mom for years who always held that over my head. In middle and high school, she'd go months, years barely talking to me, like nothing but good morning or hi, even though we lived in the same house. She'd ignore me because I didn't take out the trash, or I had an attitude about something. Once I left for college, things got better, but there were still times where she'd ignore me because she was upset about something I did. Recently, our relationship has been okay, but she started to act too close to me. She would call me and expect me to answer her immediately. When I was going through a breakup and didn't want to talk on the phone, she threatened to call the police, even though I was literally texting her. She would act like she was so concerned with my safety and well-being, even though she had gone months without talking to me or knowing where I was. Recently, we both went to get our eyebrows microbladed while on a trip together. She booked the appointment, but I absolutely hated how mine's turned out. The artist did not listen to me and lied to me about the shape, completely ducking up my brows, so I left a review. The artist then messaged my mom and asked her to talk to me about removing the review as it was having negative impacts on their business. I refused, and since then my mom has been on a rampage. She's been ignoring me, and when my stepdad attempted to get us to talk on the phone today, she immediately started yelling and walking away, saying she can't handle my attitude. She called me arrogant and rude and is upset that she can't tell me to do something without me being defiant. My stepdad, even though he acknowledges that it's trivial, has always taken her side and enabled her behavior, and keeps telling me to take it down. I'm just not sure what to do at this point. I refuse to enable her and allow her to emotionally abuse me and get away with it. Everyone always expects me to bend it or will because she's my mother and I have always end up having to apologize or give in to her demands. It's not fair that for our relationship to be steady, I have to do what she wants, when she wants. I think it's disgusting that she is willing to not talk to me over something so stupid after things have been decently good. It has absolutely nothing to do with my mom. It's my review and my opinion. You'd think someone personally attacked her the way she's acting. But knowing her pattern of behavior, she'd probably rather ignore me for years rather than accept that I won't listen to her. I've thought about going no contact multiple times, but I have a 9YO brother. I'd hate for our relationship to be impacted because of this. But I truly cannot stand it anymore. I'm 23 and my mom treats me like a child. I've been fully independent, moved to a new state, pay my own bills since I was 19, so it's not like I need anything from them, but I just don't know. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.